Do I just start speaking, or how does this work? All right, that's it. All right, all right. Hello, everyone. Good to be here. Good to be here. What an amazing talk, Eric. Really good job, because live coding is not easy. So thank you, Copilot, for that, I guess. Very well done. Cool. I'm going to talk about Astro Studio. There is a slight problem, though. I have tried to rename it, like, should I call it AstroDB, All Secrets Revealed, whatever. So I'm just going to call it Astro All Secrets Revealed, because there is way more than actually just Astro, AstroDB, or Astro Studio. I'm going to tell you a little bit about really cool stuff. So, who am I? You might have heard of me. ELIAN. I'm a lead developer relations at React Bricks, which is a CMS for React, of course, with visual components and everything, visual editing and whatever. Basically everything you want from a CMS. I am a freelancer on the side. I am an Astro maintainer. I worked in the core team for a year. I work with BGS to organize the best conferences in the world. No. React Alicante is also really, really good. Just kidding. But we organize conferences like React Brussels, React Paris, React Africa soon, and maybe some new ones in the future, who knows. I'm from Belgium. I live in Ghent. Any Belgians here? One. Hey. Do you also hate the beer here? Yes, of course, we're Belgians. We hate every beer outside of Belgian beers. Cool. You can find me online with @ElianCodes, so please, if you take any pictures, please share them with me. Tag React Alicante, tag me, tag Astro, whatever. So we have a lot of fun sharing and seeing pictures online. Cool. You're, of course, not here for me, or maybe you are, I don't know. In that case, come talk to me, hello. What is Astro? Let's dive a little bit into Astro. Who has heard of Astro, at least? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Good, good, good. Who has actually used Astro? Almost the same amount, like a little bit less. Okay, but that's cool. That's fine. So what is Astro? Well, Astro, think of it as like the web framework for content-driven websites. And we'll talk a little bit more about this. Let's start with just like, how does it actually work? Well, it's very comparable to something like Next or Nuxt, a meta framework, as you will, or maybe SvelteKit or Solid Start. Whatever you want as a meta framework, it's kind of similar. But it has some cool tweaks and amazing developer experience, but we'll get into that. This is basically what the basic syntax looks like. It's a single file component, actually. It's just like you would use in Svelte or Vue. You write your scripts at the bottom in the front matter there between the dashes, and everything else is just JSX like you're used to with React or something else. The amazing twist about this is that even though you're writing in JavaScript or JSX languages, you're shipping 0 kilobytes of JavaScript by default. And let me dive a little bit deeper into that, because I know like, that might sound a little bit strange, because I probably will need something. But yes, we have solutions. We have solutions for everything. We're cool. Imagine this as being like your application, like your page that you're showcasing. I just wrote TSX there at the top. It's not necessarily a React component or whatever. But all of these components that you see here, there might be different components in React or whatever. They require JavaScript to render, which is a little bit strange, because we actually might not need that much of JavaScript. Like, for instance, the whole footer, it's links, it's just static stuff. Why would I need JavaScript to render that? That doesn't make sense. It's only slower, it's slower on the client, it's more network connection, and sometimes you are going in an underground with the metro, whatever, and it's just very slow. So what Astro does is basically it takes all of your JavaScript, or all the components that you've written in JavaScript, and it compiles it all down to static native HTML and CSS. No JavaScript involved, by default. And of course that's amazing, because in that case you'll always have full 100 if you at least do a little bit of SEO and whatever and accessibility. But out of the box it will generally be 100, 100, 100, 100, which is amazing. That's really cool. And that's why we say that Astro is actually ideal for content-driven websites, because it's very indexable, it's very easy, it's very fast. But of course I hear you thinking like, hey, this sounds like a cool dream, but I need a button, I need a login, I need something more than just HTML, because HTML is very boring. We're not in the 90s anymore. We have Flexbox now. We don't do tables anymore. Well, what if I need interactivity? What if I want buttons? Well, we have client directives for that. And basically, that's what they do. Client directives will tell you, well, if you will tell your components how they can get interactive, when they should ship JavaScript, and how they should become interactive. You're in full control. And we have a couple of those. I just put 4 on here. We have 5, but you can also actually build your own. You can make your own custom behavior. For instance, there is one. Well, you know what? Let me first explain these ones. Otherwise, it might be getting a little bit confusing, sorry. Client load will always ship JavaScript to that certain component. Client idle will only ship JavaScript to that component, what we call hydration, when the component is in a viewport and when the component or the browser has an idle thread, or the main thread is idle. You have client media, which takes a media query like you would do in CSS. So for instance, if you have a button on mobile, like a hamburger button, that actually needs some JavaScript because you're opening something, whatever, you might not want to have that hydrated on desktop versions because you don't see the button. So why ship that JavaScript? So you can do that. We have client only, which basically means, hey, I just need the client. I don't care about the SSR or the SSG. Server-side generation, server-side rendering. And you can build your own. For instance, there is one, hydrate when it's raining in New York. So when it's raining in New York, it will fetch an API and then see, oh, it's raining. I'll ship JavaScript to that component. So you can do a lot of crazy shit with it. So take that page that we showed, well, that I showed you earlier, which is this index.astro file with all of those components. But for instance, this image slider, it will have some JavaScript because it might have buttons, it might have a scroll, maybe it fetches APIs, whatever. And if we just add those client directives that I showed earlier to that, we have suddenly islands of interactivity on that web page. Everything else will still be static HTML, just those little components will require JavaScript. And that's what we call the island architecture, because that's little islands of interactivity inside of your mostly static application. Cool. The cool thing that is these islands can be written in any language you want, because it necessarily doesn't matter, it's just JavaScript. So you can use React, you can use Vue, you can use whatever. It's pretty cool. And all of this makes Astro a very, very fast framework. These are kind of outdated, I'm going to be honest, but Astro looks really good here. But there is like a full report on that, so you can read it if you actually want to update information. But yeah, it's a pretty fast technology. Now, of course, if you ever heard about Astro, most of these things will sound at least a little bit familiar. So let's dive into the new technologies that we have introduced over the past months, or maybe even a year. We've been working on some really cool stuff. The first one that I want to kind of explain to you is server islands. So what we saw right now was island architecture, but that's mainly on the client. Now we have server-side rendered Astro components. Why is that cool? Well, because basically you're instructing your components to be delayed or delay the rendering until the content is actually available. So you can fetch an API on your backend and only show the client component or show the component in your web page when actually the contents have been received, which is really cool. You have a fallback state and everything. So let me show you a little bit how that works. This is a very simple example. Here is just an avatar component. And what we can do is place server defer, which basically means, hey, we're going to make this a server island. And then what we can do in that component itself, you can just access your cookies like you would normally do, things you can do on the server, but you can't really do on the client. For instance, here we want to get an avatar from an API. So what we will do is basically server defer that, define a fallback, so there is actually a fallback state, and then show the info. Now how that looks, for instance, is this. You have the loading state here at the bottom. It will play again in a second, I hope. Yeah. So it's basically loading, it's fetching something and only showing the information whenever you actually receive the answer from an API. You can also see there at the top that it's fetching how many rooms are left. For that, you might have to query a database, but you don't want to delay the whole page. You just want to delay that little component. So that's actually a really, really clever way of doing things. So yeah, server islands for you. Now, if you ever have worked with Astro version 2 and more, you've probably used content collections. And that's a pretty amazing technology already. But now we have introduced the content layer API and loaders. And it's a little bit different, but it's kind of the same point, like same, but different, that vibe. So how does it work? Well, basically, you can now define a collection, but a collection can come from anywhere. Previously, it was your own authored markdown files, which is cool, but you might have your content like somewhere in the cloud. Maybe you have them on a different Git repo, or maybe you have them on a serverless function wherever, or maybe you have them on a CMS somewhere. Well, in that case, you can just make a native content collection kind of thing, but with a loader. So here what you can see is actually it fetches just the countries, and it puts them in a collection. And then you can just use that collection like you would normally do with a normal content collection. So basically, you just have the collection. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, this is better. Here you can see that it just basically returns the map and everything. And you can use it like a normal thing. Now, the cool thing is, people can actually publish their own loaders. For instance, this one I helped on. It's Astro Cloudinary. If you ever worked with Cloudinary, basically they're an image service in the cloud. You can fetch all of your images and use them as a native content collection. So it's super easy. So basically what they do is here you import it, you use the component on the page, like here, and suddenly you have a full content collection of your images, which is super easy. The thing is, you can do a lot more with it than you initially think. For instance, we already have a few on the go because people can build their own. You can publish them to NPM and whatever. So for instance, this is the Notion loader. I don't know if any of you actually actively use Notion as a CMS, but you can do so now. And in Astro, you can then import it all at build time. It's going to be super fast. You can do that every time, whatever. But this works. It's really, really cool. Or maybe you just want to keep track of some RSS feeds. Maybe you want your own RSS feeds in there. Or maybe you just want to show, hey, these are my latest podcasts and fetch that from, I don't know, Spotify or something. You can do that with, for instance, an RSS loader. If you ever worked with Stripe, I don't know how many of you have, but if you have, you know how much of a pain in the butt it can be. It's pretty messy in a sense. And actually with the Stripe loader, you can just have a very easy way of working with that data. You just basically have a collection, in this case, of both your products and your prices. And it's all super easily maintainable. You can read it very easy, so your complexity of your application scales down instantly. This is a very cool one as well. If you just want your articles in a CMS, because it's easier to edit them, whatever, you can just have only your posts there and everything else built in Astro without you having to use a full CMS, which makes a lot of sense, actually, if you think about it. Now, we also have Astro Actions. And Astro Actions are a really cool way of actually using something on the server that might be an API endpoint, but you don't want to expose. If you ever work with Next.js server actions, it's kind of very similar. So Astro Actions allow you basically to scale down on the amount of publicly exposed APIs in your application. And you can build totally type-safe functions with it. Validation on the client, validation on the server without having to write a lot of custom JavaScript by yourself. Navigation and everything, it's all in there. So, for instance, one of the use cases is validating form data. If you ever worked with it, like with a RESTful API, let's take, it can be quite painful because you have to go back and forth and maybe there is an error and it's all pretty hard. This is actually how easy it can get with Astro Actions. So what we see there at the top is basically just a normal form, right? You have the name, email, and the name terms, so you know those are coming in. It's a form data object. Form data objects are already hard to work with because something might exist, something might not. So what we can do in an Astro action, we just define, hey, here I'll define a newsletter action, and we're going to accept the form. We know that form data is coming in. So it's already, form data, it's already unwrapped for you, it's there. And we know that we already have an input object. And we're going to validate that with Zod. If you use Zod, it's amazing. It's like TypeScript safe, validation and everything. So you know that, hey, we have an email, we have a term, and the email should be a string and an email type object. It's super easy. We can all check that, and then we just handle it in the handler. So basically, you want to write it to a database, maybe, or you want to do something else with it. You can do it all in that handler. And it's super easy because even if you don't have any client-side library like React, you can just do it in native JavaScript. Like you just import the action, you can navigate with it, so that's the import there. You just take the form, you do the default, the event prevent default, whatever. You send the form data, you just basically pass it in the action, you get your result, and then you can do something with it. It's super, super easy. And it gets really powerful when we take a look at AstroDB. And AstroDB was released last year. If you ever use it, it's an amazing feature. It's a first-party database API, basically, like an ORM kind of system. And it comes together with this configuration. It's built on Drizzle, so you can define your tables and everything inside of your code. Code-first databases. It's amazing. It's super maintainable. It's very readable. So here, for instance, we want a comment. We're going to have an author in that comment and maybe a body. We're going to push it to the database, as you can see there. And then you can actually just query it like you would normally do. Just at the top there, you can see comments await database.select, which is a super easy way of doing that. If you ever use Drizzle, it's super, super similar. The thing was, AstroDB released with a thing called Astro Studio. How many of you have used Astro Studio. There's the problem. Astro Studio is no more. We shut it down, but also we released a full blog post, so if you're interested in why and how, you can read that there. But there is also good news. Because we shut down Astro Studio, you can now use any Ellipse SQL database with AstroDB. And maybe in the future, that's an ideal feature that I imagine, and probably the whole team does as well. Ideally, you would be able to use it with Postgres databases and with MySQL databases and with anything. But we're not there yet. Like for now, it works with libSQL databases, which is basically a fork of SQLite if you have ever used it. And it's super simple to do. You basically just add in your end variables. And you know what? To showcase how easy it actually is, let me just try, with saying try, to live code something. I know you can't see my screen right now. I'm fixing that. Give me a second. So we're going to mirror. Y'all can see my screen? Is that big enough? Okay, perfect. I'll remove this. So basically, this is my action. I'll tell you all about that in a second. What we're wanting to make is basically an Ask Me Anything website. And what we have is basically we know people will ask us questions. We're going to define a column here with a question, well, columns, because it's a table, with questions and answered, which is default false. Makes sense. We're having that here in our questions. Then our page just looks like this. We have a form. That form is a separate Astro component, so let's check that. Basically, it calls the action and just says, hey, we're going to do the submit question one. Let me show you actually. Yeah, so here it is, the submit question. And if we go into the submit question, you can see that it's very easy. It just takes in a question, sends it to the database like here, and sets answer to false. Super simple. So I think, yeah, exactly. My database is running. You can totally see the database if you're like locally. You can just do SQL, open database, and then open your AstroDB content file. And now I can see my database. Cool. Let me quickly open that a little bit more up. Is that big enough? Yeah, okay. So that's what we already built. And it's super easy because I can show you how it works. I'm going to reload the page to make sure. Hey there. How is it going? And now if I send that to the server, you can see here in my logs, if this disappears, it just says, hey, I received this question on the server end. And actually, you didn't see any JavaScript being thrown around and everything. It's just basic HTMLs, which is awesome. And now if I reload this database here, and I will quickly do that for you, now you can see, hey, it's in the database. Now the problem is like, this is a local database. This is literally like a file that's in my .astro folder here, like content.db. That's a file. What if I want a remote? And that's what we're going to try now. I deployed this on Netlify. Let me check here. Oh yeah, I'm totally very bad at design, so I just literally like 10 minutes ago did this with V0, which is really cool. I just took the HTML and then used it. Okay, cool. That's not important. What we're going to do is we're going to make a new database in Terso. If you've ever used Terso, Terso is basically serverless libSQL. So I'm going to create a database which is called Ask Me Anything. Default group, schema database, whatever, I don't care. Just going to create it. Should take not more than a couple of seconds here. Exactly. Now I want probably to have the tokens, so I'm going to create a token here. Read and write. 1 day is fine, it's fine. And I'll take this access token here, going to put it in my .env. So here, and exactly the, oops. So let's quickly check. Ask me anything. Yep, that should be fine. Okay, perfect. So what we can do now, if we take a look at the database, it's probably empty because we didn't do anything to that remote database yet. So what I simply am going to do, I'm going to stop my server here, and I'm going to just say pnpm Astro database push. And now it will connect to that database, which is remote, see that, hey, the schema is outdated. I'll just push my changes. Now when I go back to my database, suddenly we'll see 2 tables there. The snapshot, because that's basically your versioning, or your migrations, whatever you want to call them. And there's questions. And now if I take that same token there that I copied, do I still have it? Yeah, I still have it. And I put that into my function details here in the site configuration, in the .env. So where is that? Environment variables, Astro app token. I'll probably want to change that. So let's edit that. Let's see. There we go. Save the variable. And now, of course, we have to redeploy the application. So I'm quickly going to do that. Deploys, just trigger a new deploy. and that should work in a couple of seconds. Cool. I hope it works, because I haven't tested this really. We'll see. Come on, Elify, do something. It's like the meme with a stick. Do something. It's building. You know what? We'll come back to this. I'll let this build in the background because, oh, now it starts. Right. It should only take a couple of seconds. Should. Famous last words, I guess. So, what are you all up to today? Doing good? Enjoying? Yeah, yeah. Okay, good. Woo, woo. Yeah. Okay, we're there. Building the function. Awesome. It's going to deploy in a second here, and it should also be live in a couple of seconds. Open the production deploy. Let's see. So now, okay, this works. So, hello? Do you work? Let's ask. Let's see what happens. It worked. So now, if we go back to that database, the remote one, and we load that in, we should see a question there, which is, hello. So that's how easy it can be to have a database and everything working in Astro. Cool. I'm quickly going to go to my slides again, so give me a second, please. Okay, where were we? We were talking about this. Yeah, sure. Of course, all of this was not actually very new. We've been at it for a while. There is also a couple of Starlight updates. Starlight is our documentation generator / theme from Astro. It's pretty good. If you don't know it, it looks like this. It's basically a tool like Docusaurus or very similar like VietPress and everything. But it actually has a couple of new features that are pretty amazing and very handy, let's say. For instance, now we have on-demand rendering inside of Starlight. Why is that necessary or why is that cool? Well, now you can, for instance, put a couple of pages behind authentication, run middleware, all of that goodies you get with this. Which is super cool, actually, because this is already live, it's amazing, and all you have to do is just add a simple line, which is pre-render, false. Easy. We also released new localization, because localization, especially like in JavaScript, can get a little bit annoying, let's say, or very difficult. Well, actually, now we have astro.locals.t, which basically stands for translations, whatever. You can use that. It's really cool because also you can do plurals. You can do, like you can see here, the count 99. You can use those variables inside of your translations, which is pretty cool. So this is all already out, but people always ask me what's next. What's new for the Astro team, and well, what are we going to do next? Well, announcing Astro 5. So let's go a little bit into Astro 5 that actually is already in beta, but I'll tell you a little bit about that. New major always means, hey, we're going to change a couple of things. It's always a good time to update dependencies. So we updated a couple of dependencies. And one of the biggest ones is, of course, we're dropping node support below 18.17.1. And we're fully migrating to v6 beta. Astro 5 will remain in beta as long as v6 is in beta. Actually, it's stable. Astro 5 is stable as long as Vite works with us. But we're just waiting on them to say, hey, we're stable as well, to announce Astro 5 as stable. One thing that is an interesting change, well, at least was to me as well, is that we have rendering modes, like I was telling you about. Like we have server-side rendering, we have static generation, and we have hybrid rendering. And static was the default, like no JavaScript whatsoever. Well, now in Astro 5, actually, we're changing that up because static mode is going to disappear. We're just going to go with hybrid by default because hybrid rendering basically means that you're doing everything statically except for a couple endpoints. And those endpoints might be API endpoints. Maybe you want to have something fetched from a database. You can do that. So default hybrid rendering, really cool. Just one thing you have to change is that line in your config file and you're done. One thing, if you worked with content collections, everybody loved them. Well, we're upgrading them. So basically, we're deprecating the old content collections, and we're calling it Content Layer API. So the loaders that I was showing you earlier, we have our own layer, our own content collection layer as well, which looks like this, well, the loader. Basically, you just remove, hey, content, you're moving the files, and then you just use your glob to search through the files. And it's actually, well, the old way of doing things is still not really supported, but it's still there if you want to use it. But with the Content Layer API, you will have way faster results and build times and everything. So it's definitely worth upgrading and checking that out. Of course, Astro 5 had to make some decisions about removals. Not just the hybrid rendering is gone, but we're removing the lit support as well. No worries, you can still use lit if you want because it's simply importing a script. You can do that still. We're retiring Squoosh image service because we don't use that anymore. We just have migrated to Sharp. Sharp is better, it's faster, and it's cooler. And everything that was behind experimental flags is stable now, so we don't have that anymore. Of course, breaking changes, they happen, sadly. We don't know yet what will break and what might not break, so we'll update our guide whenever we can. It's already full in the Astro documentation. If you look at v5.beta, it will tell you what is changing and how you should adapt to it. So before you start the upgrade, check it out for sure. So you're probably wondering, hey, since when is it released and how can I upgrade? Well, it's released 17 September, which was earlier this week. You can upgrade by npx at astrojs/upgrade. In this case, that's the normal one. Since it's still in beta, we're having, well, you'll have to add a flag for the beta version. But yeah, it's almost as, well, we'll have everything ready as soon as the actual release drops, which hopefully is soon. Let's hope that V makes a lot of improvements on their end. And I think that's basically everything I wanted to say to you. So yeah, I think there is one thing that's left to say. If you want to stay updated on Astro and what everything is happening in the Astroverse, check out astro.build, which is the official website. There is a blog and everything where you can read up on things, documentation, of course. Astro.build/chat is a Discord. So if you ever have any question, doesn't matter how stupid you think it might be, we have a really, really, really good community that will help you. They are like really involved. Thank you very much. If you want to follow me, it's at ELIAN Codes. Thank you very much.